It is my pleasure to welcome the Consul General Pauline Carmona to our campus today. She was born in Paris in 1973. Elle est Parisienne. She'll remind us of that, I think, probably during her talk. And she entered the French diplomatic corps in 1997 and was initially tasked with a very easy assignment, the ex-Yugoslavia, as part of the Balkans division. And then she managed the dossier for the expansion of the European Union as part of the EU Cooperation Management Team. From 2003 to 2006, she was stationed in Hong Kong as Deputy Consul before being named a political advisor in Tokyo. Ms. Carmona headed up the Democratic Governance Mission as part of the Global Economic and Development Strategies team at the headquarters of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Paris at the Quai d'Orsay from 2010 to 2012. From there, she served in the leadership of the ministry's Human Resources Department as an advisor of foreign affairs responsible for contracted employees until 2014. On September 2nd, last year, Pauline Carmona officially replaced Romain Serment as the Consul General of France in San Francisco. I should point out that she is the first woman to be appointed as the French Consul General in San Francisco and is the only female Consul General in France's U.S. Diplomatic Corps. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Pauline Carmona.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carrie. First, let me say how pleased and honored I'm here. I'm pleased to be here today in front of you. It's my first time to Utah. So just 2 days this time. I really hope I will have the opportunities to come back and to enjoy this really beautiful state. And so thank you for welcoming me here. First I will tell you a little bit about my job. What's the role of a consul general in diplomacy, and then I will explain a bit more about the French diplomatic network, how it ranks compared to other countries, and then a bit about the our main priorities today. So first, don't know if you're familiar with the role of a consul general in diplomacy. So I think you all know that they're ambassadors. Ambassadors are posted in capitals, and they represent their country. So my ambassador is posted in Washington, and he represents France, and he has to deal with all the subjects where France may have an interest in the United States. But as you know, of course, the US is a very big country, and it's a federal country with states, with their own powers, own competencies. So the ambassador, usually in these big country, the ambassador needs the help of consul generals, so other diplomats who represent the ambassador, who have all or parts of the functions of an ambassador in other places than the capital. So in the US, there's the ambassador in Washington, and there are 10 consul generals on the territory. So we don't have the means to have 50 consul generals, of course, but we have 10 consul generals. And I'm one of them, so I'm posted in San Francisco. And from San Francisco, I'm also in charge of what we call the jurisdiction. So it's the other states upon which we have a competence. Utah is part of my jurisdiction, and it's the second state after California that I have the opportunity to visit. So I'm really happy since I've been in San Francisco for only 5 months, so I'm really lucky to be able to visit you today. So the competencies of a consul general are quite the same as an ambassador. It depends on what we are doing in the state, in this province. First issue is to be the link with the French community residing in our jurisdiction. So we are here to register, to know about our community, to deliver them a lot of papers, to make some, administrative tasks for the French people residing there, to ensure that they are safe if there is, an event such as an earthquake or a security event. We have to ensure that the French people are safe, are well taken off, to inform the family, to make the link with them. And then we intervene also in many fields where France can have an interest in California and the other states of the jurisdiction. It's very large. It goes with culture, of course, with science, with education, a lot with economy, with helping the French companies who wants to export or who wants to settle, to open an implantation in the jurisdiction. Coming back to education, and because that was the pretext of my visit to Utah. There is very huge particularity in Utah, which is the very big the large numbers of students learning French here, but not only at the university, also in elementary and middle schools. I'm sure you have heard about the dual language immersion program. And I had the opportunity to visit yesterday one of the schools, one of the elementary schools teaching French, which was Fox Hollow School. As a total, we have 3,000 kids learning French in these dual language immersion schools, and it's really remarkable. And what is remarkable, it's the commitment of the state of Utah, of the Department of Education, and I think it's the key for something so ambitious to work. It was really impressive, really moving for me to visit even first graders and to hear them speaking French, and to see that after 5 months they're able to understand what the French teacher, it's a French teacher, she only speaks French, not a word in English, not supposed officially she doesn't speak English. It was really impressive to hear them, and at the end I was lucky enough to take part to an assembly with all the children, and I told them. Actually, I told them a bit about my job in simple words, and I concluded that actually we're doing about the same job, as ambassadors, because I consider them, and it applies to you as well, as ambassadors of the French language, of the French culture in Utah and in the U.S. as a whole, because mainly my job as a diplomat is to meet people and not to impose my language, my culture, but to create an interest, and also to create an interest in my country about what you're doing here and what you're thinking here. And so it's mainly about creating bridges, building bridges, and it's really fascinating to see what's going on in Utah. So. This was mainly for my job as Consul General in San Francisco. Then a few words about the size of French diplomacy. Our diplomacy is quite ancient tradition, and we are today in terms of figures, in terms of the number of embassies, the third diplomatic network in the world. So the first one is the United States, the second one in China, and the third comes France, so before the UK, before Germany. We have today 163 embassies in the world, and then we add 16 representation towards multilateral and regional organizations, such as, of course, the permanent representation in New York at the United Nations. It's part of them. So 163 embassy, 16 permanent multilateral representation, and something. So it's quite a big network. And something which is very particular, very specific to France, is our cultural network, because culture, education, as I was saying, is part of our competencies. We have decided to keep it under the hat of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we have a very large network of cultural institutions abroad, we have two kinds of institutions. We have the French institutes, Institut Français, one a little bit more than 100 all over the world. It's places where you can learn French, where you can attend cultural activities, where you can meet, a French philosopher, a French researcher coming for a debate, for a conference. And we also have the Alliance Française, French Alliance. There's one in Salt Lake City, and our president is here today. And more than 400 all over the world. And the Alliance Française are very interesting because they are private structures. The French institutes are public structures, directly funded and linked to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where the Alliance Française, they were born from a local initiative involving French citizens, and usually involving as well, people from the country of residence. So here, fellow Americans, who join to organize cultural events, and sometimes to also develop French classes, or to invite writers as well. So it's about the same activities as the French Institute, but they are very meaningful in terms of their links with the country and with the city where they stand, because they are really able to create strong links and really friendship relations with the local population. So how do we, maybe just a few words about, why do we have such a large network? Because, and maybe it will be one of your questions, as everybody knows, we've been going through a very hard economic crisis, and we have huge budgetary constraints. And every time a new government arrives on the power in France, and so there's a new Minister of Foreign Affairs appointed, and every time the first file on his desk is, whether he's going to reduce the diplomatic network, French diplomatic network, because we have such a budgetary constraints that budget ministry asks us to give back a lot of money, and the easy solution would be to close down 10, 15 embassies abroad, and then it would settle the issue. But minister after minister, the answer has always been the same: that we need to keep our large network, which we call the universal network. The minister, and it was reaffirmed by Laurent Fabius, our current minister. He reaffirmed that French diplomacy has to be able to cover through its embassies, through its large network, all the issues, all the possible diplomatic issues happening in the world. So this is a constraint, because they put the budgetary problem that all the ministry has to take its part of the budgetary constraint, but this is a very clear choice, and it's called by our current minister as global diplomacy. That's what he told to our ambassadors gathered in Paris in last August, that French diplomacy has to be a global diplomacy, covering the whole world and covering all the issues. So maybe I'll be answering a bit more now about our priorities. Our priorities today. First, the context. The geopolitical context is a very complicated one, very chaotic one as well. Maybe what is new. What is new is not. It's not really about civil wars and states disintegrating and fighting in many places of the world. It's not really new. Unfortunately, it's always been going on. Maybe the new thing and something that we have to deal with is the power vacuums in many parts of the world. There used to be, after World War II, a bipolar world with the US and the democratic world on one side and the USSR on the other side. And as you may know, France, especially since General de Gaulle, was, always a bit critical about it, saying, "No, we are here, we also exist, and we want to be an actor in this world. We want to have our say." Of course, we stand by the democratic world. There's no doubt about it. But we want the world to be more multipolar, and sometimes it has, led to frictions and misunderstandings with the United States. Because the US were not very enthusiastic about France having its say and its own, defense policy and foreign affairs policy. And you may remember the speech of French foreign affairs minister in the UN when the war against Iraq was launched. And this was so it was Dominique de Villepin. He stood firmly against the war in Iraq, and so we had some misunderstandings in the past. Then after the fall of the Soviet Union, there was the issue of who's going to take the power, who's going to organize the world. Of course, France was very afraid that the US would be the only power in the world, but the US didn't want to assume to be the only political power in the world. It's too much for one country. So some other emerging countries have appeared on the scene, countries such as India, such as China, and we've been trying to have them more present and to take their responsibilities, political responsibilities, at the same level as their economic way. But these countries were and they're still quite reluctant today to take their real part in organizing the world governance. They really stick to mainly to their economic power and economic expansion. And what's been happening for maybe 5 years is a new factor, which is the rise of terrorism. And the rise of terrorism is not new, of course, and especially in America, who's suffered a lot with 9/11. But what's happening now is the implication of terrorism leading to disintegration of countries. They used to be Afghanistan, but now they are many more countries where you can't say really who controlled them, which group is in power, and usually the countries are divided in tribal zones, or different groups are fighting to get the power. We had just before entering here, we were speaking about Yemen, about Libya, and it's these kind of countries which used to be controlled by a strong man, usually as a dictatorship. So very absolutely don't say that the situation was a good one, was a perfect one for the populations and even for the world as a whole. But the situation today is even worse because nobody is able to control these countries, because a lot of arms are circulating. And because it has also, internal consequences for our countries, for our democracy, is that people, and that's what happened and what led to the attacks in Paris on the beginning of January, is that people, terrorists who want to commit an attack in a country, in a city, now they have many places where they can train and learn about these, how to use guns, about the techniques of shootings, of committing a terrorist attacks, and they can get all the propaganda around it. So it's we're really in a context of geopolitical upheaval and a very chaotic world. So in this context, our four major lines of actions have been reaffirmed by our minister in terms of diplomacy, and they can be summed up in 4 words: peace, planet, Europe, growth. So I'll give a few words for each priority. So of course the first priority is peace. And it's particularly, so it's meaningful in the context I was explaining. It's meaningful in this year, which is a year of commemoration, remembrance of the beginning of First World War I. So we commemorated a lot in France and in Europe about the First World War, and we're also commemorating about Second World War. We had big event linked to the 70th anniversary of the D-Day in Normandy last summer. So really committed. We have all this historical background about two terrible wars which have destroyed our country, completely destroyed Europe. So we keep this in mind, and it's still very vivid in our spirit, and it inspires a lot our priorities and really the wish to avoid and to build peace. But in order to build peace, France, as well as the United States, has to engage abroad in many theaters to fight against terrorism. And just as well as this, we're really working a lot with the United States on these issues. And so last year, France has been engaged in a few theaters, such as Mali in Western Africa, where a new terrorist group linked to Al Qaeda had come from Libya, and then I can show you it. All this Sahel line, and so these there were a lot of people who had to leave Libya, and they arrived in the Sahel countries, Mali, Niger, and Chad, but mainly in Mali, and attacking the people, attacking a lot of economic interest companies there. And so France decided to launch an operation. First it was a French operation, and then it was put under the United Nations umbrella. It's still present on the ground to fight against terrorism, because with terrorism come a lot of threats for the local population, especially for women who with a lot of young girls who prevented from going to schools and killed, and really terrible situation. Another place in Africa where we launched an operation to try and prevent a civil war was Central African Republic, which was, almost there was a coup d'état, and it was on the brink of explosion, and the French army arrived and tried to calm down the situation. And French forces are also engaged together with the United States in Syria. So it's trying to fight against the Islamic army in Syria. Second main issue is the planet. So the planet it's a big world. Two main lines. The first one is is the governance of the planet. Who is in power? Who is in charge? How to get the countries, act with responsibilities for the interest of the world. So, of course, the main organization, which is the UN, which has been created in 1945, precisely to ensure peace and to try and find a solution to avoid, countries getting into wars. The UN system have always had some deficiencies and lacks, and we have all these new emerging countries which are not always acting with really, a lot of responsibilities, and some founding country as well, like Russia, like China, using their right of veto as soon as they feel that their interests are threatened. And the problem is that with this use of the right of veto, the UN is blocked and thwarted when it wants to prevent some mass atrocities. And so France has taken a lot of initiative, but especially in the field of increasing the efficiency of the United Nations system, and especially in allowing the UN to intervene when it knows that mass atrocities are going to happen. The second main issue concerning the planet is, of course, climate change issue. We, French, just like the US, have committed ourselves to take a very strong diplomatic action in order to limit the rise of temperature. It's not to limit the temperature, but to limit the rise of temperature. Our aim is to limit the rise to, so it's 2 degrees Celsius. In Fahrenheit is 3.6 degrees. And because we know for sure that if nothing is done, the rise in Fahrenheit would be between +7 and +9 degrees, which is absolutely impossible. We cannot imagine that. We can fear the consequences, but it's absolutely impossible to live with this fear. So France, within the European Union, has always been very active in trying to persuade the big emission countries to reduce their emissions, and including the emerging countries who are quite reluctant to do this because they're still in the process of economic growth, economic emergence, and they answer to us, okay, you had your time in the 19th century where you used to emit a lot of pollution, you were using coal and so on, and nobody prevented you at that time from doing so. And now, please let us go through our economic emergence. So it's a bit difficult, very difficult negotiations. And these negotiations take part under UN umbrella. They are called the COP negotiations. And the next one, the COP21, to climate, I don't know exactly the acronym, but it's COP21, which is the next one taking place in December this year, will take place in Paris. So it will be the biggest diplomatic, in terms of figures, in terms of attendees, the biggest diplomatic event that will ever take place in Paris, in the suburbs. So it's something quite, 20,000 delegates. It's something quite huge for us, and really the all the way of our diplomacy, all our ambassadors are strongly committed to this, and every country, every embassy organizes outreach activities in their country of residence to explain about it, to explain about the consequences of climate change, and how the country, how together we have to move, we have to do something. The third priority is Europe. As you know, France is one of the 6 founding fathers of the first European Community, and then European Union. Once again, the main motivation was peace, was how to unite among ourselves to avoid other wars. And since so first it was not a really political organization, the angle was more economical. It was through coal issue and energy issues, but then it led to a very big and very strong political organization. It has grown a lot because now we are 28 members of the European Union. So of course the issues that we are dealing with today are not at all the same the issues that we were dealing with in 1958. And the main issue today, there are a lot of course, but the main issue is about economy and how to use the EU, how to organize ourselves to better support economic growth, and we have very opposite positions on this issue, but we really think that something France really thinks that something has to be done, that the euro, the European common currency, also has to remain, because some, maybe you've heard about latest elections in Greece last weekend. The euro, fell quite a lot on the markets, and there are there are tensions on the euro. There are some European countries who are not members of not take part to the euro system, who would be very happy with the euro falling down again and disappearing. But we, as France and Germany, the Franco-German relationship is really crucial within the European Union. We really feel that we have to progress. We have to strengthen. We must not strengthen in the European Union in all fields. The fourth priority is economic growth. Then, on a French point of view, so again, France has been suffering a very difficult economic situation, high rates of unemployment, 10% this year. Priority for the ambassadors, for the representatives of France in foreign countries, is to promote French exports, so to help the French companies wanting to export in the country. Sometimes it goes through, helping remove some regulations which prevent them from exporting or for settling some branches. It also goes with attracting investment, attracting tourists, attracting students in France, And this is really linked with what I was telling at the beginning of my speech, because to attracting an investor, attracting a tourist, it's really part of a whole global effort on how we promote our language, how we promote our culture, our historic sites, and it really has to be seen as a global effort for the ambassador. Promoting French education, promoting French language does not have to be separated from promoting France as a good place to invest and a good place for business. They're all part of the same efforts, the same branding, as we say today, and now all the government really insists upon this, that being good on one point, being good on French culture, but then bad on the other one, which could be people all come to Paris for culture, for seeing the museum, but then when you ask them, are you going to to make business in France? They'll say, oh no, never, absolutely. France is a communist country. You have trade unions. I will never make any investment in France. Wow, then we have a problem, and we really have. It's not enough to say it's crazy idea. It's wrong. We really have to prove that we are a business-friendly country. As my prime minister said in the city in London a few months ago, that we understand, that we have some reforms to make to be more business friendly, and so it's really part of a global effort. Then, as a conclusion, I will stop to let you ask a question if you wish. What I really want to stress is the importance of the ties between France and the United States. We are very old allies, and our we have very strong, very good relationships in all fields, not only with the US but with the States as well. And in the context that I was explaining, it's more necessary, we feel that it's more necessary than ever to build together, so to join our forces to build a sustainable and a safer world. Thank you very much.
So we have just a few minutes. I know some of you will have to leave to your next class, but if you'd like to ask the Consul General some questions, please line up. We ask you to use the microphone because we're recording. Tell us your name, what you're studying, and please, we have a few minutes for just a few questions.
My name is Collier Beardsley. I'm a neuroscience major. I had a question about Mario Draghi at the European Central Bank. He's been pushing for quantitative easing since September, and the idea is gaining traction. We could see quantitative easing as soon as April. Do you think that the influx of cash will be positive for the French economy, or will we see a bout of inflation?
Globally, I think it's quite positive. Given the current economic situation in France, I don't think we have to fear from an increase of inflation. What we are fearing is more about deflation. Going back to what happened in the big depression in 1929, beginning in the United States. Many factors. The situation today in Europe and mainly in France is not, of course, completely similar, but there are some similarities which lead us fear much more about deflation than inflation.
Thank you.
My name is Chad Sorensen. I'm also a neuroscience as well as a French major. And you mentioned the elections in Greece. If Greece does decide to try and leave the European Union or does leave the European Union, you mentioned what would France, as far as a strengthening Europe, what positions might they take or what policies might they push to respond to that?
We really hope that we won't, we won't come to that result. And my feeling is that they won't leave the European Union. They have absolutely no interest in leaving the European Union. Greece had a strong interest in entering the EU and benefited a lot from the EU. Then other problems led to a current situation, which are corruption and misusing of European funds. But it's really the kind of countries which had a huge economic interest in entering the EU. Then, what can be maybe useful, positive in the Greek elections is to show the European Commissions, to show our partners, which are quite reluctant, like Germany, that EU has to be more structured, not only on the monetary policy, but also on the budgetary policy. Because the main, we have a major lack today is that we don't have a common budgetary policy. We are divided about this. And the problem is that when we adopted the Maastricht Treaty, which led to the EU, to the common currency, from the beginning, so the idea was that nowadays national countries don't have sovereignty anymore on their currencies, and that we should organize ourselves and have a common currency. So that was done. But from the beginning, we were supposed to build at the same time the budgetary side. When you have only the monetary side, but not the budgetary side, you're not able to have a collective and sound policy, and that's the problem. That's also why the euro has been so much criticized, is that it's normal that people in charge of monetary policies have monetary reflex, and that they act this way because it's people on the budget side who should have their own policy, their own reflex. So maybe what's happening in Greece will help. I hope it will help the European Commission and also our partners to understand that now let's move and let's go out of this monetary only policy, which useful on one side, but on the other side, whose only result is to make the crisis even worse.
Thank you.
I'm Brett Jory. I'm studying political science and Russian. My question was about the EU as well. You said that France supports strengthening the EU in all fields. So my question is, does France then believe that the members should cede more sovereignty to the EU, and in what areas? You talked about monetary and budgetary, but also defense and security.
Defense and security are one of the main areas where we think that EU members and EU as a whole should intervene, and EU members should take their part of responsibility, as we've been saying in the latest crisis in Africa. Each time EU members were really happy of France intervening and really supportive, but when it comes to helping us in terms of funds, in terms of logistical support, then very few of them were present, if not none of them. We really think that first on the principle it would be now that the Soviet Union has disappeared, it would be good for Europe to be seen as it would give Europe more political way to have the defense and military and security part. But it would also be good for us and for countries like the UK, like France, to have more collective support on these kind of actions.
Okay, may I just follow up?
We'll go to the next. This will be our last question. Mihai?
My name is Mihai Skrobotovic. I'm studying international relations and French. And I would like to know if the French government recognizes a connection between the failure to integrate Muslim immigrants and their families and Islamist terrorism in France.
It has wow, it's a debate as a whole. Of course, it has a link, and what it's not, Islamism, Islam fundamentalism is not the only issue. A big issue is about integration, education, economic crisis, these suburbs which turn into ghettos, and my prime minister used a very, very strong term, which was apartheid, to talk about these suburbs. But it's true that, of course, Islamism has a role to play, and people in charge of security in France are working very hard to understand. So first, what's going on the internet, and to the now they want to take some actions to be able to talk to the to the big companies, big internet companies, and have them block. This kind of when they found out that there is, that a terrorist attack is under preparation through the web, through the internet. We think, my authorities, we tend to think today that we should be able to do something. Like, it's possible to block a newspaper before it's published, but that the same should be done towards the internet, because it comes to national security and to the life of peoples. And the other side of the issue is also to understand more what's going on in the prisons, in the jails, because usually when we look at the life of these terrorists and what happened to them, there's always a moment when they're incarcerated, and instead of putting them in the in the right direction, it worsens the situation, because they meddle with people who have committed much worse crimes, and they also usually meet in the prisons, and it's not always the time, but they enter in contact with fundamentalists, and they enter in contact with their brainwashing propaganda, explaining that the jihad will be the solution, that they will save humanity, and so on and so forth, which is not at all the teaching of Islam, which is a teaching of terrorism. So there is something happening in our prisons that the government has to tackle as well.
Thank you very much for your questions, and please join me in thanking Consul General Carmona.